Hello, I am going to explain with a crash course of quantum physics, a little bit of biology, and some neuroscience how we create our own realities. Now, I have three different notebooks I've been working with. I have done a lot of research, a lot. And all right, this is the point though. I can get a little off subject, so let me stay on subject. So, quantum physics. Our observation has the ability to transform an electron into either a particle, which has the ability to do one thing, or a wave, which has infinite possibilities. Okay, so the double slit experiment, these physicists years ago, okay, they did what's called the double slit experiment, where they took a little electron gun and shot it at this barrier with two slits. Now, they had an observation, an observer, which was a camera, and when they shot it, the moment it hit the observation, it turned into a particle. And they know this because it ended at the observation wall, okay, which told them where it ended up, only one place. So our observation affected the electron by turning it into a particle that only has the ability to do one thing. Now, they turned the cameras off. They turned the cameras off, and they did the same thing. They shot the electron gun toward this barrier. Now, what happened when they turned the observation off, the camera off, is that the electron turned into waves, essentially two waves, and they could tell this because of the way that it ended up. Now, the highest point of contact was on the very back of this wall. See this barrier, okay? So it turned into a wave. When they turned the cameras back on, essentially they turned it off first over here. They turned it back on, same thing happened. Particle. They moved the camera and turned it back on. Same thing happened. Particle. They left the cameras where they were, and they turned them back off. Same thing happened. The wave. It turned into a wave. Our observation directly affects the electron turning into either a particle or a wave. Okay? That's basically quantum physics in a nutshell. Crash course. So, now, let's move on. In our brain, when we think a thought, that thought gets basically filtered through the hypothalamus, which then reacts with, like amino acids and everything, right? And creates a chemical which is then released into our bodies, into our cells. Now, our cells, which, by the way, on average, a human has 37.2 trillion cells in our body. That's on average. Now, our cells have these little receptors, okay? And when the hypothalamus creates whatever chemical based upon whatever emotion is behind the thought that we're thinking, it will dock onto these receptors, okay? When it docks onto the receptors, it will then start to say, okay, what do we have the most of? That's what we're going to interact with in this one cell. So let's say it's something like stress, fear, guilt, or shame, okay? That's going to create cortisol, and that's going to dock onto the receptors, and then it's going to actually start entangling with the cells in our body. And it's not only going to affect the cell, that specific cell, but it's going to create more and more and more if that's what we're thinking, if that's all that we're thinking. Now, let's bring that down a notch, okay? So we think about the double slit experiment. Our initial thoughts, they are basically the electron, okay? And they're coming in to the hypothalamus, which is essentially our observation, okay? And that's creating either a particle, the ability to do one thing, or a wave, which is infinite possibilities. Now, our cells are not only they're not only taking in and absorbing our thoughts and our emotions that have a wave behind them. Whatever we think, whatever we say, whatever we feel, it has a vibration behind it. It just does. It's not only doing that, but it's also taking on everyone else's around us in our environment, also by the foods we eat, etc. Okay, now these cells in our body, we already have a bunch of them that are preconditioned from our upbringing. Let's say we grew up with narcissistic parents. We literally have been taught to only care about other people's emotions, their needs, their wants, not our own. Okay, so we're constantly thinking about that, right? That's what it, like an empath is. Okay, now when we are seeing that there is a specific, what is the word here? When we're seeing that there is a specific pattern of either people or situations around us, it's literally a holographic reflection of what's going on in the cells in our body. Now, there's one other thing that I want to mention here before we move on to other videos, because we need this basis. Everyone, if we're going to understand this, we need to understand these basic foundational things, okay? There was also what was called the bird experiment. So this German couple, I believe, they literally took birds, these European robins, out of the sky in mid-migration, okay? And they put them in these cages. Now, what they did was they put these magnets around the cages and then spun these cages around. And what they found was that the birds went towards the magnetic pole. So this has to do with their navigational system, what they were figuring out, the whole point of the experiment, right? If we can get over the fact that they literally stole these European robins from the sky in mid-migration and started experimenting on them. So what they found, though, is that their navigational system was partly from photosynthesis, looking directly at the sun, because there's something in the back of their eyeballs, which is in the back of our eyeballs, human eyeballs, called cryptochrome. And when the photosynthesis from the sun hit the cryptochrome, it sent off these blue and red rays of basically light, right? And so that, with the combination of the magnetic pole, which there's a magnetic pole in the earth, that was their navigational system. That's how they knew where to go for generations, right? And that's going to be really, really key and important to understand here in the next couple videos. But I just wanted to give that basis, that foundation, before we dive into, not only how we create our own reality, but then how to create what we do want. Okay? Stick with me.